In his book, Natural Perfection, Longchenpa says that there's ordinary mind and there's pure mind. And he says that although things are not completely non-existent, he says that all experiences, internal and external experiences, are the displays of Rigpa. And I understand that the mind is well, it's not easy for me to explain the question, but I understand how things are. What they are is the result of dependent origination, and that nothing is inherently existent. But the displays of pure mind of all of our experiences is something that continues to elude my grasp. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Couple things. Normal mind is pure mind misunderstood. There is nothing but pure mind. When pure mind doesn't understand itself, then it looks like normal mind. And the chain of dependent origination is just an argument. There's nothing there. It doesn't actually do anything. There is no chain. The way appearance works is completely irrational and unfathomable. There's no way to get a handle on it. To say it's the miraculous display of Rigpa is all very well and good, but having said that, what have you said? You haven't really said anything. The fundamental characteristic of this is that it is absolutely unresolvable. You can't get to the bottom of it. You can't define it. You can't even find it. You can't even really find a place to start looking, even though it's any place you start is very obvious. You can't pin down where it is you're starting from, where it is you're going. You don't get anywhere, and you certainly don't get to any kind of resolution or depth or progression. And seeing that as it is pure mind. Because pure mind is just a euphemism for this phenomena which embodies inconceivable intelligence and consciousness. Not as separate principles, but as just arguments for what it consists of. But you can't find intelligence and you can't find consciousness either. They don't resolve. They don't actually exist. They're imputations. I mean, the bottom line is you go looking for anything here, you don't find anything. Even though it doesn't go away, it's completely clearly displayed, but you can't find it, you can't resolve it, you can't get anywhere with it in terms of finding what it is, in terms of converging on some coherence. And all of these principles that Longchenpa talks about are more like debating principles, sort of looking at it in the abstract or from outside. But it's not abstract, and you can't be outside of it. So all of that is not particularly valuable, except to the extent that it deconstructs itself. You know, if you go around the merry-go-round of Longchenpa's, elements of actuality long enough, they fall apart into emptiness, and you're left holding nothing, which is the point. But you can be left holding nothing without even going around the merry-go-round. If you just look what your starting point is, and see, you can't even tell, but you can't define your starting point. So your starting point is the finish line. The starting point of any inquiry is unfindable, unspecifiable. So as soon as you started, you've already finished, because there's nowhere to go with it. There's no it to go with. I don't know if that's kind of undercutting or bypassing the principles of your question, but it may be addressing it obliquely.
think I understand that analytically and cognitively, but the actuality of seeing, or well, I'm left with just words of experiencing it as the drama, the movie. I mean, more and more I sense the lack of concreteness, the lack of anything that's it's hard to take anything seriously.
Yeah, sure.
But to see it as my ex-wife would say, a cartoon, as things seem to really be. That I don't. That's not. It's not showing up for me as I guess as I would like.
Well, seeming shows up, right, or whatever, and then if you look at this seeming, I mean, look at it concretely, not abstractly or analytically, but just look at it, and you can, what is it? So here we're calling it a seeming. What is it that is a seeming? In what sense is it a seeming? In what sense is it anything? And right from the get-go, you're left holding nothing, because in what sense is it a seeming? Well, I don't know. Try and pin down that even that it seems, and you can't find it. You can't isolate. You can't specify. You can't put your fingers on it. I mean, it is profoundly self-evident. It's clearly not nothing, but it can't be found as anything. So even as a seeming, even as any degree of kind of interface, if it's seeming to be, even bypassing seeming per se, but seeming to be anything, seeming to be an experience, seeming to be experience is a euphemism for what? Just right there. So that's a good question. So here's experience. So what is this referred to? What is this experience? And right away, you kind of just have to go back to the thing itself and say, well, experience is this. This is experience. What is experience? Experience is this. And so you get a tautology that doesn't take you anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. And sure as hell doesn't resolve into anything. So kind of anywhere you start, you can't even get to the first step of even starting. Because you can't even find what it is you're investigating. And again, this I don't mean to be in the abstract or in an analytical sense, just experientially. Experience is, you could say, undeniably. But having said that, what are you referring to? And right away, it's just like it drops out. You can't answer that question. That question is absolutely unanswerable if you're if you're straightforward with it, if you're honest about it. Well, okay, here's experience. So that's just the koan. The koan is your starting point of any inquiry. That's the koan, not the inquiry itself. Even just trying to find a starting point. It's like, okay, here's experience. So where what is it I'm starting with? Is it anything? Is it nothing? And any question you ask about it is just smoke. It's just like, what? In what sense is that? Is any of that have anything to do with anything whatsoever? And the whole thing just dissipates in its own unfindability, in its own tenuousness. I mean, it's actual. This is its power, is that it is actual. This actually is what it is, but what that is not anything in the strongest possible sense. You can't find anything other than the fact itself, and you can't even find the fact as a fact. It's self-evidently the fact because there is no other fact, but even claiming that it is a fact is like, you're left holding nothing. I don't know. Does that click
well,
for
what
you?
dissipates for me are all the questions.
Yeah.
Every time I think it's worthwhile to come up with a question, it just
Sure.
It's hardly. I hardly get beyond the articulation of the question. It just that just goes.
Well, that's great. I mean, that's quite appropriate because you can't find anything to ask a question about, really.
Well, asking the question itself, it helps to see that.
Yeah, of course.
Because you have to try and find something
Yeah.
to formulate a question
Yeah,
about.
absolutely.
And since you can't find a way to ask it,
Yeah.
you then see that there is leave
Yeah.
left.
Oh, yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm still surprised that experience is still as substantial as it is, and yet cannot say anything about it, cannot ask any questions about it, cannot measure it, cannot articulate it, da, 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 da.
Well, experience is as substantial as it ever has been, but then you go and try and find what exactly is this substantiality. Is substantiality actually a substantiality? What is it? And again, right there, you falter at the first step because substantiality is undeniable in one sense, but having said that, what more can you say? And if you look, I think you'll notice that you can't go farther than that. It's experience presents itself as if it had all of these qualities which were obvious and undeniable, but you go looking for any of them, let alone all of them, and you can't. Nothing shows up. Nothing resolves. It's like a mirage. It's clearly here, but as soon as you go looking for it, you don't end up holding anything.
I guess I'm finding that I'm starting to lack the motivation just even to look.
Yeah,
sure. More and more, I don't care.
Yeah, well, but that's real. That's good. I mean, what is there to look for? What's there to care about? And if caring comes up, that's cool. But what is caring? And caring is also like what? Just you can't find it. So it's a claim. Caring is a claim that is basically unsubstantiatable. Just like substantiality is a claim that's unsubstantiatable. Even existence is a claim that's unsubstantiatable. It's like, well, this exists. Well, sure, obviously, but so what does that mean? It's like, you can't take that. You can't go any further. You can't go anywhere with it. You can't go anywhere with anything. It just leaves you here, and you can't say and then so okay, cool. What is here? And you can't go anywhere with that either. So you're kind of left absolutely nowhere. But it's not a nowhere because you can't find a nowhere either. You can't find a negativity. You can't make this go away. But you can't find it. So the whole thing is just intrinsically paradoxical up its own wazoo. It's self-contradictory every which way from Sunday. It's a technical sense.
Kind of like a movie strip. You just find one side or one beginning or the end, and it's constantly twisting itself.
Well, it bootstraps itself up out of itself. It exists in itself, made of itself, motivated by itself. And what do you do with that? It's like, again, you can't. There's nowhere to grab. There's no handles. There's nothing to get a hold of. And there's clearly not nothing, in any simple sense.
Maybe it's personal. Maybe we should take it offline. But you and I met for lunch a few months ago, and after talking, you said, "Well, Mike, maybe what you want to do is just give up spirituality." And I'm finding that's exactly where I'm getting to.
Good.
And
what does any of this have to do with spirituality?
So shall I valet your car?
No, I'm with him totally. No. I just come to this conclusion.
I mean, spirituality is again a kind of a claim of there's something here that's important and it's spirituality, and that's why But again, you go looking for spirituality. What do you find? You don't find anything. It's another one of these. It's another one of these ways we confuse ourselves. It's another one of these ways we turn pure mind into ordinary mind by making a claim of there's spirituality, there's specialness here, there's transcendence, there's liberation, there's whatever, fill in the blank. And you can't find any of these things. And of course, you could argue the fact of being able to explicitly not find them is the very essence of spirituality. But you can't prove that either. It's probably as close as you can get to a powerful assertion about it, but it's nothing. It's nothing.
And yet, knowing all that, though, you can still say words about it. I mean, look at
Of
me, or
course.
even you sitting there saying all these words.
Sure.
And as long as you know that they're just, not even pointers, really. They're just poetic expressions, really.
Sure.
The music.
It is. It's more innuendo of this indicating itself.
It's like giving a person a name. It means nothing, but at the same
Sure.
time, it's what it is.
Well, stop it, Fred.
Thank you, Ginger. Give me five.
It's also awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome. It's you can't find any other awesomeness than this.
There is something about, and this might not be the seat of spirituality, but if you are looking for awareness, this is probably a better place to be than pretty much anywhere else in the local vicinity. And so there's a value to coming here.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And whether you call that spirituality or not, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
That's beside the point.
But there is a real value to the search.
Yeah, because there is discovery possible.
Absolutely.
That's
right.
and even though the discovery turns out to be that there's nothing to discover, that's powerful. That's objectively the case.
But the search is sort of chicken and the egg issue, because you search because you can't help not. And so search is necessary because it's already on its own somehow. See what I'm saying? No, you don't. That's okay.
I'm not quite sure.
Well, he's saying there's a value to coming here, but that's only if it's a value to come here.
course.
If it's equally a value to be somewhere else and discover the same thing, then then that's where it is. So the
Sure.
search itself.
There's nothing but value,
Right.
but because wherever you go, you're here.
There you are.
And here's where the value is. And the value of here is this here-ness itself. Whatever it happens to look like, whether it looks like hanging out in a room like this, or being in a seedy bar, or, sleeping or under a bridge, or whatever. I mean, But there is arguably the greatest human achievement is noticing that fact, discovering that fact as it actually is. Discovering what this actually consists of and what your relationship to it is. And of course what you discover is its unresolvability, but that's a fact. That's the fact. That's the result. And it's a powerful result. It's not just a failure to find the result. On the contrary, it's finding the actual result. That there is no result is the actual result, and it is very powerful. It's liberating. It is completing, because we discover our true context and our true nature. It's all this is very strange and paradoxical, because in human approaching it, when you look at approaching this in human terms, it's all negatives. It's all what it's not, and it snatches everything away until you're left with nothing. And yet, it itself is entirely positive, in the sense that it is entirely actual, it is entirely creative, it is entirely meaningful, and so on and so forth. But not in human terms at all. So approaching it looks like, a progressive negativity in human terms. But as you discover this, you discover and ultimately notice that you are an incredible, a non-human or transhuman positivity, actuality, which is, objectively true, which is actually actual. It just, from a human point of view, is completely, essentially non-existent because it does not compute in human terms whatsoever. And that's the problem with analytical approaches, and which by definition are sort of biased from a human framework, ultimately end up being negative, being deconstructive, being they eat themselves until there's nothing left. But once there's nothing left of the human analysis, where are you? You're in this actuality, this positivity, which is most profoundly not nothing, but it's not anything at all in human terms. From the point of view of human terms, it may as well be nothing, but it isn't. It isn't nothing. And so to be with it as it is to leave the framework of human reference and be with this inconceivable paradoxical non-linearity and transcendence and so on and so forth. Again, you start heaping human words on it and it turns to gibberish because they just don't apply. And yet it is what it is. It is as it is. Because it's actual, it's a positivity.
Peter, is the positivity in the this that we see here, is it in the potential of this?
Well, it's one and the same. The potential of this is included in the this of it. I mean, it's not like there's a this here and a potential over here. The actuality of what is, as it actually is wholly positive. And that may include things that might be classified as potentials or actualities or dynamisms or what have you. But of course you can't get a handle on any of that stuff, so it's sort of gibberish to try and specify it or differentiate it.
Yeah, so you don't need to deconstruct this obviousness here.
Can't be done anyway.
Yeah. But you can't construct it either. Right?
Yeah, no. You're just left with the fact. And the fact is entirely positive. Positive is a loaded word. It's probably not the best word. I think actual is a really good word. It's entirely actual, and actual and there's no good word. That's the problem with human words, is that they have implications that ultimately don't apply or include partialities, and there's nothing partial about this. This is it.
Right.
And yet,
it's also not it.
Yeah, but then from a human point of view, you can say it's everything and it's nothing. It's positive and it's negative. It's So again, when you sort of fall back into a human analytical mode, it just turns into gibberish right away. It turns into, you contradict yourself and just start spouting, pseudo Zen poetry about, existence and non-existence are one. It's like, and yet the fact itself, none of that actually captures the fact itself. It can indicate it. It can sort of, be vaguely waving in this direction, but it doesn't. But this just is. Everything has nothing whatsoever to do with this. Nothing has nothing whatsoever to do with this. because this is as it is, and it's not everything, it's not nothing, it's none of the above. It's beyond human categories. It's exactly what it is. It is actually what it is. I mean, this in the strongest possible sense. It's the only strong sense that anything is, because this being as it is the basis for any assertion of any being as it is. All of which is abstractions of this fact, which is absolutely inconceivable in human terms.
Did you follow that?
Yeah. Very clear.
That was prismatic.
That was fun.
I followed it, I didn't get it.
No, it's nothing to get, so
Followed it and led you down the path. Nowhere.
Peter, it's obvious, I suppose, that one can deconstruct experience or any part of it.
right.
But is it possible to deconstruct the tendency to reify that experience?
Yeah, I mean, you can. Yeah, sure, you can.
Say that again?
You can disprove partiality, and that's the strongest sense in which you can use sort of analytical modes. In other words, you can pull the rug out from under your own feet, and that's the strongest use you can make of analytical modes. So they deconstruct themselves. So reification is a claim. It's a partiality, because it's partial in the sense that reification is only meaningful in the face of some non-reification or some lesser reification or something, and that can be seen to be non-existent, and so to be irrelevant. So then you're left with the fact itself, which is neither reified nor not reified. It's another category which has no category. It doesn't fall into those categories. Those categories can't contain this, even slightly.
I was just thinking about that's pretty much my definition of spirituality, or a spiritual environment, or a spiritual force. It's a reification, demolishing place or force, and the world at large, as we now have it in our society, is a reification, affirming kind of force.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There is a difference, and for spirituality in the sense of light coming down from above and so on, which may or may not be true. But for me, the reification, demolishing situation or force is what I tend to think of as the spiritual presence.
Yeah, that's practical. Because reification is, the creation of partiality. Reification is holding this to be this or that, or in this or that way to some degree, and it can't actually be done. And when you stop holding this to be this or that, or to be exist in one way or another way, what you're left with is the actuality. The actuality is quite clear when you're not holding it to be this or that. When you're holding it to be this or that, you only have what you're holding, and you miss the actuality. Which is the whole reifying issue.
I was thinking what's so confusing about this is it just keeps looking like something that's familiar.
Yeah.
When I was waking up this morning, I was sort of seeing things come look familiar, but I was kind of knowing better than whatever was happening. Like, and everything that was happening just sort of came and passed me really quick, like You know, I mean, it was there and then it was changed into something else. But it was, I mean, I realize that I'm looking at this sort of transhuman field or something, you could say, that and at nothing in a way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
A potential nothing kind of, but it keeps, its calling card keeps seeming to be something familiar to me.
Yeah.
I mean, everything familiar comes up and sort of, you know, gives me a kiss and disappears.
Yeah.
Like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, yeah. It unendingly presents itself as potential versions of itself, none of which actually capture the totality.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, what's behind it is totally let's say transcendental. It's not non-human. It's non-human in a way.
Yeah.
It's totally transcendental. It's like learning to recognize the transcendental or something.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
sure. Yeah, to recognize absolute unresolvability, to recognize absolute, indeterminateness.
Right. The beauty of the whole thing is that none of the stuff you think that existed all your life that actually exists.
No, not as such.
No, right.
I mean, it exists as much as it ever did, but it never did.
I mean, that's not like so cool. You know, I don't have to worry about my clients at work or anything.
No,
because, like,
of course not.
you know, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know, it's this it's a big load off, you know.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, this would be a truly horrific situation if it actually existed.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You know.
The real magic is that everything remains functional, or apparently functional.
Oh yeah, it does itself. It does itself effortlessly, seamlessly, and in toto, in real time, just off the cuff, just like bang. You know, everything is exactly working, exactly doing exactly what it does.
Inclusive of thought.
Just inclusive across the board.
Everything.
I guess in a certain way, that's the only way you're really going to see. You're going to see reality in a certain way, is sort of like through this. It's almost like looking through a prism in a certain way. I mean, sometimes it's easier to look through it, see the indeterminateness of everything. Other times things seem kind of solid, but you kind of know they're not.
Sure. But all of that is reality. It's not just the indeterminacy sort of on the extreme that is reality, and the presentations aren't. The presentations are real too. It presents itself as all of these implications, and that's real. It's really doing that, and yet all of these implications are nothing whatsoever other than indeterminacy, because you can't actually resolve any of them. They present themselves as if they were coherent, as if they were resolvable, but that doesn't stand up to examination, because if you look at the actuality of experience, you know, nothing resolves, nothing has coherent, and that's explicitly and obviously the case.
Right. Yeah.
It's only if you don't look that you can assume that it's not.
Right. Yeah.
You know, but if you look at the actuality, the actual real-time, we call it dynamism of experience, the way this happens, the way this is what it is, it becomes obvious that how slippery and unresolved it is.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, I often say there's no final version of this, so there's no preferred view, there's no hierarchy. It's not like any portion of it is deeper or more profound or more actual, and you know, the superficial aspects are less profound, and then the deeper unresolvability is somehow more. No, because you're seeing the same thing, you're just seeing it sort of from different angles. You can look at the surface of experience, and that's it. Or you can look at the depths, the unresolvable, subtle, infinite dimensional depths of experience, and that's it too. No more, no less.
Yeah,
it's just a sort of a different view, you know.
Right.
It's like you can look at the surface of the earth, or you can look at deep space between the galaxies, and you're just looking at reality. And they look very, very different, but they aren't. This is deep space between the galaxies, right here. This is what it can look like. And it can also look like, if you train a telescope out in the middle of nowhere, it can also look like that. But you're seeing exactly the same thing.
Right, yeah.
And the one isn't truer or more profound than the other.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to keep telling myself that this is the sort of, let's say, the transcendence. I mean, I don't want to keep putting that label on it. I mean, because it's a little bit extra work.
Yeah. But it comes. It's built in. It comes without. It doesn't need you to maintain it because it is that.
Yeah,
it actually is that.
You remind yourself.
It proves it. In fact, you can't disprove it. You can't make transcendence go away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you're just really good at sort of entering into psychosis.
Probably that. Yeah. But I mean, you don't you remind yourself that this is a transcendence all the time. You know it,
Yeah, because it's self-evidently and undeniably and completely obviously that.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not that it's transcendence again compared to some non-transcendence.
Yeah.
It's just that the nature of what this is intrinsically absolutely unresolvable.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a simple way to.
Yeah,
that's just very simple, and that's mechanical. I mean, it's not esoteric or metaphysical. It's just mechanically, it can't be resolved.
Right.
Everything is fuzzy.
Yeah.
Everything is too dynamic. Everything is too instant. Everything is too, disappearing in real time, morphing in real time. Nothing resolves. Nothing has any stability.
Right.
Any end result.
Any even duration.
Yeah.
Everything's already something else. So in what sense can anything be anything? Because you can't. And this is just mechanical. This is just explicitly the case. It's not subtle or even ephemeral. It's just
right. Yeah.
But it's easy not to notice that because we're all addicted to following our interpretations, which claim stability. They claim that there's sufficient resolvability to at least think about it or talk about it or name things, ignoring the fact that there isn't.
Yeah, right.
Just asserting that there is and doing it anyway.
Yeah, right.
And then with it's kind of like the Gregorian calendar, where it's sort of the time is slipping and they have to correct it every 4 years, or have this correction factor of it's not. We're kind of the calendar's kind of heading off into left field here. We better bring it back to.
Yeah, right.
And so we do that with we hold things to be a certain way, and we do so with doggedness, and you get to a certain point where the evidence becomes overwhelming that somehow things have morphed beyond the pale of what you can convincingly maintain in your story. So then you revise your story or change it or whatever, and then you hang on to that for a while until the same thing happens. So these sort of crisis points where you have to sort of scramble. But in between those points, we're generally quite happy to just sit with our bullshit version of things, ignoring the fact, the obvious and really explicit fact that it's just not the case.
Right, yeah. When I saw myself actually just between sleeping and waking, actually seeing things and seeing, oh yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, I was really happy that my mind or whatever it was getting that little bit.
Yeah,
I was saying, hey, that's really great. It did it by itself.
Yeah,
I didn't,
Well, we build up sensitivity. I mean, that's the measure of progress in all this work, is that you build up a sensitivity where it just becomes more and more second nature and more automatic to be with it as it actually is, and to split off from it less heavy-handedly into these sort of insanities of interpretation.
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah, because when I saw that, then I didn't do my normal sort of spiritual practice, because I thought, wow, what? It was really weird, but I was glad that thing sort of worked itself out on some other level.
Yeah, but that's what happens. It becomes intrinsic.
Yeah.
And it percolates below the level of conscious participation or intention or anything like that. It just becomes.
That's a miracle.
Yeah. But But that's where consciousness goes. That's what it does. It goes. It's like water. It keeps falling to a deeper level. And when you hit a certain point in unfoldment, it does it more rapidly. Or let's say it seems to do it more rapidly because you're sort of, explicitly moving away from one paradigm into another.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
What?
can you just turn it off or something? Oh.
In a profound way, all this spiritual stuff consists of nothing other than training in clear perception, training in being with your actual perception of your experience as it actually is. So it's actually just perceptual training. It's training with noticing what you're actually experiencing and the way you're actually experiencing it. So it's just a kind of a perceptual sensitivity training or something, really, and because we don't notice that we aren't doing that. Typically when we're just in a normal sort of a human mode, we think we're experiencing our actual experience, and of course we are, but we're simultaneously augmenting it with all of this interpretation, and we have the two smeared together and juxtaposed in such a way that we can't tell the one from the other. So just to notice and develop a sense of clarity of just simply what you're actually experiencing, that's all. Being with your experience as it's actually happening. So it's not esoteric or even particularly subtle intrinsically. It's just a matter of clear perception, training in clear perception. So it's really mechanical. I mean, obviously it's psychological.
Sounds like good CIA training.
Well, yeah, in a sense it is. It's engaging with the reality of your experience the way it actually is, but just in mechanical, in the most basic mechanical terms, in the most basic perceptual mode.
Yet at the same time, the rabbit hole goes on forever.
Yeah, but that's because it happens to.
Yeah.
Not because that's something we're adding to it.
No.
We don't need to add
It
mystification.
does go on forever.
Yeah, it has its own mystification that comes in, it turns out, but simply training in clear experiencing, which again is just sort of basic, learning to be coherent with your experience, is very straightforward and mechanical. And then it happens that what you are experiencing, or what experience is, happens to have all of these very interesting aspects. But you discover that very directly, and you don't need to do anything about that. You don't even need to be in that mode. It brings that to the table. You don't have to bring anything to the table. You don't even have to be expecting it. It's something that turns out to self-verifyingly present itself.
Well, it is interesting that the mind can make these leaps, perceptually, without having the actual experience, that it seems to be able to come up with where something is going.
Sure, yeah. Well,
it's not of any use at all.
No.
It's actually
the facilities and potencies of intelligence are, unimaginable and unpredictable.
I think we're also drawn into conventionality because of social reasons, though, too.
Oh, sure.
I mean, we want to be nice. People give us what they do, and we feel as though it's nice to respond back when it's sort of useless and silly. But it's so before you know it, you're you're sort of caught into a conversation or an action or a behavior that in the middle of it you're thinking, what the hell am I doing?
Sure,
and even with people who are the closest to you sometimes, it seems.
Sure. Well, it's a conundrum because we live in basically an insane society of people that are oriented towards essentially, a consensus reality that's entirely bootstrapped out of nothing. It's wholly unreal, and everyone plays games of enormous emotional involvement, entanglement, and importance, and all sorts of behaviors that are just basically empty ritual. They have no basis in anything other than the fact that people are insisting on and expecting cooperation, and it's kind of, to one extent or another, the only game in town. And if you let yourself be cowed into playing it, you have to address that. You can either go along with it and get sucked into it and have it in a problematic basis, or you can just play it as a play along, just for convenience sake, and do it like the same way if you were hanging out with kindergartners. You might talk about their dollies or whatever without giving a shit about it, just as a way of sort of social discourse, and have it not be entangling. Or you can just be a jerk and be quiet and be have people look at you funny and lose all your friends. But they're not really your friends anyway, because they're just friends within the game, within the context of the game.
They never were.
If they're your friends after you stop playing the game, that's when they're your real friends. When you're sitting quietly in a corner being shunned, the people that still are interested in hanging out with you, those are your people that are your friends.
There's another way to look at it too, a fourth way, which is if you don't take any of it seriously, it doesn't really matter. You find yourself just in the flow of it. It's like you're surfing.
Well, to me, that's the second way, but yeah.
Which was what? You're playing along with it? Like you're...
Yeah.
Well, but even saying that you're playing along with it is like it's making a value judgment on it, of it. But if you don't even give it that much seriousness, it's just the play of appearances.
Sure.
And that includes the personality combinations that show up.
Yeah.
So there's no judgment involved
Sure.
whatsoever,
Yeah.
or assessment.
I mean, you get to a point where it doesn't matter,
Right.
because you see that playing the human game is as real and as unreal as not playing the human game.
Right.
There's nothing actually gained by not playing the human game, and there's nothing actually lost by playing it. You know, and so you do reach a point where you just don't really care, and if someone comes and says, "Hi, how you doing?" You say, "Oh, I'm doing great. How are you doing?" You know, and it's like, "Well, what did you do?" You say, "Oh, no." You can do all this stuff without, and it doesn't matter because that is actually and literally and entirely a presentation of reality.
Yeah.
You know, and you may say, "Oh, it's because." I mean, all of this looks very different, and it keeps shifting back and forth depending on where you are in your own arc and trajectory of unfoldment. At a certain point, it looks anathema. You know, it looks like, oh my God, all this human stuff is the enemy, and I have to extricate myself from it, and I have to get out of it. And what do I do with it? But then, at other points in your trajectory, it looks like you get that. Wow, you know, all of this is all reality. Reality has been doing all of it all along, and it's. You know, there's no version of its presentation which is actually any purer or less pure than any other version of its presentation.
And yet it's so astounding that it can dumb itself down.
Yeah, but to it, it's not dumbing down. To it is just another version of it.
Yeah.
But,
you know?
Yeah, well, I guess it takes high spiritual attunement to see the venal as the exalted.
Yeah, you could qualify it that way, but like I say, at different points in the trajectory, you can be with this in different ways. But it's certainly true that at certain points in your trajectory, that stuff is a real conundrum. It's like, well, what do I,
And then?
because at a certain point you sort of feel like you're trying to extricate yourself from all of that, and extricate yourself from your own dullness and your own sort of sleepwalking within the context of just sort of being sucked in, being browbeat into participating in what everyone else is doing just because they're doing it for convenience, like sort of sell your soul to get along, so people don't shit on you or something. But then at other points, that's not a conundrum at all. It's just because it's fine. It's just as good,
Well, it's wherever I am in my arc, I just see that some of the amount of energy it's presenting. It's high levels of energy, but its expression is so vacuous, so empty of any interest or meaning.
Yeah.
It takes so much fucking energy.
How hard is it to sing happy birthday?
Yeah, right. But I think that's reinforcing the belief that there's something real there.
Yeah, but again, these things look different at different points in your trajectory, and these points of view are all viable. I mean, when you're at a certain point in your trajectory that a certain thing seems a certain way, that's fine, because that's how it is for you. And that's your sort of your challenge, or your project is to be working with integrating with it or sorting it out on that level. But these things spontaneously morph and evolve and shift. And ultimately you get to a point where there's no difference. There really is no difference, because it's all radiance. It literally is all radiance. Radiance is doing the stupidity as much as it's doing the transcendental, infinite light shining at, beyond space and time. They're one and the same. They literally are one and the same. And admittedly, at certain points in your trajectory, that becomes clearer than at other points in your trajectory. But ultimately, it is the case. And but all that's really theoretical, because in practice, you have to work with where you are. And so, if you are at a point where these things are issues for you, then that's your challenge: is to find your way through that morass, and there's a lot of ways to play it. And depending on how you play it, there's lots of different outcomes. You can You can try and be a double agent and sort of play along as if you're conforming and sort of be a closet doing it your way kind of person, or you can be a hermit and a recluse, or you can just be a jerk, just be a jerk and shave your head and wear funny clothes and call yourself some Sanskrit name and no one will want to talk to you anyway, or whatever,
Can you just rip the masks off and get to the juicy underbelly?
Well, sure, you can do that too. That's kind of in the category of the second.
Those are funny names.
Yeah.
Or you can just fit in as you are and be labeled a space cadet.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a good one.
I mean, there's lots of ways to play it. And ultimately, it doesn't matter how you play it because it's just a transitory phase, and you're going through that into something else, and the actual meat of what you're going through is not even on that level. That's just a level that seems to be presenting itself as relevant or important, and it's not really, because all the real action is much more sort of intrinsic and subtle in terms of how you're holding yourself in your energy, which is very irrational and non-linear and non-behaviorally oriented, and that's where the real action is in this imputed arc or trajectory of unfoldment is actually a shift in very sort of deep tidal levels of where you sit in your energy.
Well, thankfully, you don't have to do it all yourself. The universe
No. Yeah, the universe is, it's all taken care of. I mean, it's all totally prefigured. Even if it feels like you're struggling with stuff and banging your head against stuff, the universe is actually doing that too. It just looks that way on the surface. So
It looks like self-interested and malicious puppets.
I was going to say, you're probably not going to the same meetings I'm going to.
Thankfully, I got to thank my lucky stars. Well, it's actually break time, so why don't we knock off for a few minutes?
It's time to peer into the camera.
Yeah. We'll be back in a few minutes, online people. Kind of a computer term. It refers to picking yourself up by your own bootstraps, which of course is impossible. It's like it means a perpetual motion machine.
You know what bootstraps are?
It's like picking yourself up by your suspenders.
Right. How can you do it, right?
You can't actually do it.
Right.
So it's a paradoxical image of something that's doing itself. It's like a snake eating its tail.
Reach beyond your grasp.
It's like it's I mean, the classic example in Dzogchen, they say that reality is doing itself in itself. It's not being done by something else. It's doing. Well, how can it be doing itself? It has to be itself in order to be doing itself. So, where does it come from? Well, it comes from itself, and so it's gibberish. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, and yet it's profoundly true, and it indicates an aspect of the irrational nature or the miraculous nature of what you see. It's like God makes everything. God made everything, let's say. But who made God? God made Himself. But who made God so God could make itself? So it goes in a circle. In other words, it's gibberish. So in that sense, it's like picking yourself up by your own suspenders.
Peter, could I ask for clarification on a technical terminology?
Sure, why not?
Can you clarify a little bit what the natural state is that they're referred to continuously?
Yeah.
And all context, and particularly in terms of what you're teaching tonight, what you're saying tonight, what corresponds to that?
The natural state is actuality. This is the natural state.
Mm-hmm.
It is not what you think it is. It is not what you can think it is, because it is not thinkable. It is not addressable in terms of characteristics. It is itself. It's like nothing other than itself. And the whole spiritual conundrum is exactly that koan. What is the natural state? In other words, what is this? What's going on here? And when you discover what the natural state is, that of course is realization. So, I mean, the clearest example of what the natural state is it's this. And then, well, okay, what's that? Well, we can see it. And then you're with it, and that's the shortest route to discovering what it is to be with this and let it show you what it is. And the more you can do that, free of any expectations or characterizations or characteristics, the more efficiently and nakedly and comprehensively you will be able to discover what it is. I mean, calling it the natural state is actually very good, because it is that condition which naturally is. This which is. I go further and characterize it as radiant presence, but which I do to bias your approach to it or your understanding of it in terms of its positivity. Simply because I find that the most efficient sort of lever or vehicle of engagement with it, which I should borrow from Kashmir Shaivism. The activity of this, the push of it, the sizzle of it, the dynamism of it is very obvious, and yet entirely transcendental, or entirely within the natural state itself. But because it is so obvious, it's a nice interface point to be with this, because it's you can play with it, you can engage with it very explicitly and very easily. It's arguably a little less elusive than some of the other, characteristics that this condition contains or displays.
Peter, if I'm experiencing it, well, let me put it this way. It seems like everything is radiant presence.
Yes.
If I'm experiencing,
Yes.
And there's no distinct. I mean, when I can notice like that, there's so many different levels or different things that are happening.
Yes.
I mean, some are thoughts, some are people, but all of it is just.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the important thing to notice, is that is the way in which it's all the same. The way in which it's all made of the same thing. It all consists of the same thing. And then you discover what this actually is.
Well, I didn't discover it. I mean,
Well, you
I
notice
know
it.
it. I'm not experienced.
Yeah. You notice it. I mean, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Because we're used to thinking this is this and that's that, and they're different. But it's the common denominator. It's the way in which they're the same that's interesting. And that's how you discover what experience is. Because, of course, everything is experience.
Yeah.
And experience itself is radiant presence. So being with it on that level is being with that which is always true, that which is true across the board, which is everything. That's the natural condition. It's like when you dream at night, you can dream anything. Whatever you dream is made of nothing but dreaming. There's nothing present whatsoever other than dream itself.
Yeah.
It can look like anything. It can look like thousands of people and situations and problems and worlds and stuff and things happening, but there's nothing actually present other than dream. And so cutting through, holding it to be this and that and all these different things, and coming to the common denominator of what's actually present as this medium of dreaming itself as the only actual substance that is there, is getting to the actual event. And likewise, the actual event here is radiant presence, or what I'm calling radiant presence. You can call it experience, you can call it whatever you want. And everything that seems to be present is actually nothing but this, nothing but that. And the nature of that is it can present itself as if it was differentiated into all these things that are apparently different, just like a dream can do. But there's nothing actually present but the radiance. Just like in a dream, there's nothing actually present but the dreaming, even if it looks like there's all this stuff and events and so on.
Well, when some of the things start getting, mysterious or indistinguishable, or whatever. I sort of feel like screaming, "You're making all this up!"
Yeah,
and
sure.
I laugh. Well, yeah, I am.
Sure.
I'm not making it up. I'm experiencing it.
Huh.
But it's.
But you are that. You actually are that which is making it up.
Yeah.
So in a profound sense, you are making it all up.
Yeah.
Because you are not, even though you may think of yourself as appearing as an object within this field of all this complexity and differentiation, you are actually the whole field. So you're appearing within the dream, but you're actually the dreamer as well. So you are that which is doing it all.
I could just as well say, I'm making all this up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can sort of see why you have to put blinkers on sometimes, because you just couldn't, when you could just sort of sit and wonder, or notice forever.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Well, you go where you go, and that's karma. Some people may just sort of go and sit there and drool, and eventually someone puts them away, or they whatever. Get evicted, and you end up on the street, and the city puts you in some home somewhere.
right.
But functionality can happen too, and that's it too. So
Yeah. Well, it's sort of nice that of the unfolding process that it can sort of integrate.
well, it does. It tends to.
A little bit.
It tends to integrate, and functionality comes with, and you discover that noticing and functioning are not mutually exclusive, and you discover ultimately that they're one and the same.
Right, because they're all distinctions that are unreal.
Yeah, unreal distinctions. There is actually nothing but noticing, and there is actually nothing but functioning. And what's doing the noticing is the same thing as doing the functioning, and vice versa, and it's all ongoing forever. And there's nothing to do because it's doing itself.
Right. We were talking about that last week. Things are going much more efficient.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Economical emotion.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Yeah, when you settle in, when you develop some headway in integration and settle into this a little deeper, you'll notice your functioning gets much more efficient and sort of streamlined and effortless and effective. You know, well, just efficient, less wasted energy, less wasted unproductive energy. You know.
Right. Well, the energy seems it's so strong that most of the time, or when your connection with it is strong.
Yeah.
So you don't need to apply a lot of pressure. You can just be very subtle, and incredible things can happen.
Yeah, because the energy's there. You know, it is the force that's doing everything. It is the motive force of the whole universe. You know, which is pretty, needless to say, pretty oomphy.
Yeah.
And so, of course, when you got that working for you, you're sitting pretty.
This is where Marvel Comics comes in.
Yeah. And brightest day and blackest night.
It's such a miracle that it happens at all. It's like against all odds and all the bullshit that it's so amazing that it happens at all, that the realization of the miracle that it's just amazing that through all of it you can really get to that place.
But because it is that, so no matter how obscured it is or how confused you are about it, the fact that it is that, it shines through because it demonstrates itself because it is itself. Since it is that, it shows itself as that, in spite of any efforts to the contrary that you used to wallowing in.
It's pure grace.
Mm-mm.
Peter, what are we doing when we measure? I mean, whether it's time or distance or I don't know. I mean, there's just so many different ways we can measure.
Oversimplifying.
Yeah.
You're taking something which is entirely transcendental and looking at it in terms of a relatively limited range of characteristics and averaging it and holding it as if those characteristics apply.
So I guess like in a recipe, it's okay to do that. I mean, you know.
Well, it's always okay to do. There's nothing wrong with doing that.
But it just don't make anything meaningful out of it.
Yeah, the only problem with doing anything like that is thinking that it's actually true.
Right.
Seeing the actual relationship prevents it from being entrapping. In other words, if you know you're averaging, then it's not a problem. If you think it actually is that, and that is in the entirety of it, then you're cutting yourself off from the open-endedness of it, which is where the vitality of it lies.
Right. This happens with such ease.
Sure. Well, we can do it easily. It's a property of intelligence. We can do this effortlessly and easily, and it can be useful to do so. But it's not comprehensive. It doesn't include the totality of what's actually happening. And as long as you know that, then that's not a problem. But again, when you fall into thinking that your oversimplification is what it actually is, the full extent of what's actually happening, that's when you cut yourself off from the nourishing richness of actuality, and you find yourself in a sort of a dull, stilted version of things that is not, it doesn't include the way it actually is.
So if you look at it sort of more as a metaphor or as you said, a relationship, just keeping things sort of fluid, you don't get entrapped.
Sure. It's an approximation is all. As long as you know that, then it's not a problem, because the when you know it's an approximation, you're not expecting the approximation to be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And we do this not just in measuring, we do this anytime we designate anything, naming things or holding things to be such and such. You're Pam and you're Greg and this is a chair. When you're doing that, you're doing the same thing. You're applying approximations for arguably practical purposes that are essentially censorship. It essentially excludes an inconceivable amount of what is actually present as phenomena, and you're taking a relatively limited and very heavily restrained aspect of characteristics, and you're approximating the open-ended actuality with this limited designation, and then you work with the designation. And again, it's not a problem as long as you know you're doing it. If you don't know you're doing it, then you have the risk of falling into thinking that your approximations are the sum total of what's actually present.
Right.
And then you cut yourself off from the richness and the lusciousness and the vitality of actuality.
Well, when you say I know when I'm doing it, I think that I sort of see that as being sort of aware at the same time as more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, then it's not entrapping. Probably the central and most important aspect of that is doing it with yourself in terms of your idea of yourself. So no matter how you think of yourself, if you get that the way you're thinking of yourself is a partial approximation, and you inconceivably and vastly transcend that approximation, even if you include aspects of it that you're explicitly, designating. Because if you fall into believing your own self-image that you hold in your mind, then that's probably the most damaging mode of delusion.
That's an interesting thing, Peter, really, because I was thinking about that this week, that I don't really have an idea of what my self-image is.
That's good.
I mean, in the sense that there are always these sort of attempts to try to ascertain, who I am from the way in which I interface with the world and with other experiences of people. But I just kind of came to the conclusion that, when I'm, for example, walking down the street, that there is just some sort of semblance of radiant presence that is, and that's a useful way to hold,
Sure.
Anything.
Yeah, because it's more open-ended. It's less exclusive.
It doesn't have like the stickiness of interacting with other people or
as something or as a role or as a definition. Because that's the only thing that's entrapping, is when we hold anything to actually be a certain way, and if we hold it that way we're holding it is inclusive, that it actually is that we think it is, then we create littleness, we create smallness, we create separation, and we cut ourselves off from vitality and from open-endedness and from possibility, and ultimately from freedom.
Yes, I would say that's, ultimately the biggest hurdle in this process is sort of getting beyond the idea that there is anyone that we can be, or that there is any definition of ourselves to get.
Yeah, absolutely.
That,
anything and everything, and most especially you, are a complete, transcendent, unfathomable infinity. And you can approximate that all different kinds of ways usefully, but the approximations cannot capture this vastness that you are.
What's interesting too, that the self-awareness can take on many different forms depending on what mood I'm in. So that sometimes I have self-consciousness, and sometimes I have self-awareness, and then this transcendence that happens. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing in and of itself, is why I sometimes have this, it's almost a brittleness to do with the image that I have of myself, which isn't real, but it's something I have to consciously kind of break up.
Our relationship with these approximations is part and parcel of our path of unfolding, because it's easy to be with them and have them be very solid and precise and specific and seemingly objectively true, and then it's easy to be in a mode of grappling with these things or challenging them. It's easy to be in a mode of seeing beyond them but having them be present, and it's easy to be in a mode that's just completely outside them altogether, and typically we move in and out of these various positions with regards to this. And the degree of fluidity we have and unstuckness we have is an indication of sort of where we are in our unfoldment. But this is the challenge. This is the only thing that cuts ourselves off from actuality, is our erroneous and oversimplified ideas of what it is. And then if we get trapped into relating to those ideas and as opposed to the thing itself, even though of course we're never actually cut off from the thing itself, then we live a kind of a schizophrenic life and can feel very stilted and frustrating and unfulfilling. And on that note, it's quitting time. Good night, online.